Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today I'm very excited because this is a subject that's very close to my heart. What's your path to self-love? I've got a really great expert guest. Her name is Meghann Dawson. She's a transformational coach. Welcome, Meghann.
Thank you, Lyn. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. So first of all, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what's led to you doing what you're doing, Meghann.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Yeah. So hello to everybody. I'm happy to be here. Again, Meghann Dawson is my name, and my backstory started out right out of the gate with chronic trauma. When I was born to a teenage mom and ended up catching an infection right at birth, which wreaked havoc on my little body. And so that has led to a life that, for me, that has never known without pain. I've never had a body that didn't know severe pain. I've had surgeries pile up my entire life. And along with the medical issues, also in my home was an abusive father. I was the oldest child, the only daughter, and very much grew up not only in physical pain, but very much feeling like I had to hide my own needs and take care of the family. It was common for my mom and my brothers to come into my bedroom, often when my dad had had a blow up, and I very much felt like I had to calm them as young as 6 years old. And so what that led to for me was many, many years, well into my 20s, of my own survival coping mechanisms. I didn't realize at the time, but things like perfectionism. I very much built a successful career and was thriving in that. But behind the scenes, I also suffered with my own forms of addiction, terrible relationships, and eventually found myself married to a man very similar to my dad, he was verbally abusive to me. So late one night, I was nursing my newborn daughter, and this was now 17 years ago. And in the middle of the night, I believe it was the first time I truly heard my own inner voice. Growing up as I did, I think I just knew that inner critic so much more intimately. So for me, that inner voice just felt like a strong, deep knowing direction that I hadn't really gotten before. And what it said was, you need to do better. It's time to do better. You're going to pass on the same wounds that you have to your daughter. And for me, that was a wake-up call. It led me on a journey for years of my own self-discovery and healing and learning to trust myself and share my story. And now that essentially all these years later is my coaching framework, essentially, I call it the unperfect level up. The unperfect level up is for you to have an unperfect life, which in my mind is you define what your life is, and we stop trying to live the perfect life that somebody else has defined for us.
Exactly. Yeah, I can relate so much to what you've just said because, well, like you say, we're our own worst inner critic to start with, and there's no such thing as being perfect, is there? Because we can always do better. But it's just
Exactly.
knowing that, you don't have to beat yourself up if you're not already doing better.
Right, exactly. And I feel like it's an endless cycle chasing perfection because it was defined by somebody else.
Yes.
It was, the whole idea, the big house, the two-car garage, the nice car, having to have kids, and it's a cookie cutter version of life that makes it so simplistic. And when we chase that kind of perfection, we're just in a losing game. We're on the hamster wheel of life, and we're never going to reach the destination we're striving for, where the path I walk is the unperfect one, where instead I define what success means and I live that. And there's no striving. It's simply learning what success means in every given moment of the day. And it's just a different way to live your life.
Absolutely, because I think we can put so much pressure on ourselves, and it's all, like you say, to do with externally comparing ourselves to other people, rather
Exactly.
than, just thinking, actually, why do I need to do that? Why do I need to have a better party than for my daughter than, the one that she's just been to, just because it shows I'm keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. And it's just ridiculous, isn't it, when you think about it?
Isn't it? It's ridiculous. And, I just think back to the times I lived that way and how much of it didn't even feel good in my body. I just didn't know what those feelings were at the time. And so a big part of my belief now and how I live is we have to know that deeply, intimately. We have to know ourselves, having a curiosity about ourselves over judgment and knowing ourselves so much that we know what alignment feels like. We know when we're doing things that truly align with our soul's purpose. And we very much know when to enforce a boundary because those behaviors in our day to day feel misaligned. They don't feel good
Mm.
in our body.
Also, because we put so much pressure on ourselves, isn't that the very thing that causes us stress, which then causes any ill health and health issues that we experience?
Exactly, right? And there's the hamster wheel. And there's the kind of process that keeps us small because what happens is, and this was very much my story, looking back, I'll tell one story. I've been writing my book for the last few years, and I was on a memoir writing class. And so much of my life story I was sharing, just as I am today, about my chronic health background. One of the stories I share is when I was born premature, the infection that I caught, they believe was partially caused or could have possibly been caused by the doctor back then. Here, if you go back to 1979, my mom was 16 years old. And when she went into labor, her water first broke, but the contractions weren't coming very fast. And the doctor was out on the golf course
Oh,
and suggested she just wait and come in the next day.
ooh.
And so by the time I was born, the staph infection had ravaged my little body, and maybe that could have been prevented. I'm not exactly sure, but maybe it could have. And so when I write that story now, it's coming from a healed place. But when people hear my story, sometimes they want to feel more anger in me. They want to feel like, gosh, I'm angry for you. And anger has always been an emotion that's hard for me. It's something that I've pushed down so much. And so somebody asked me if I happen to have autoimmune disease because I've always hid my anger. And it turns out she was right. That year, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease and eventually thyroid cancer. And I truly believe that a lot of my later in life health problems were very much tied to me holding down those emotions my whole life.
Exactly. And even your initial, once you were born, health issues could be, I believe, somehow passed through your mother's DNA, through her stress.
Yeah. Very, very much. I mean, if you think of her, think of, I have a lot of empathy for my mom, thinking of her, at 15 years old, just trying to live her life. She very much denied the pregnancy until about the 6 month mark when it got impossible to hide. And so I just can't imagine the fear that she was feeling and then just her own trauma background. And then you look back through all of her ancestors and all of that is passing on and passing on. And so I very much believe that when we recognize that as a possibility, it is upon us then to transmute that and learn how to heal that wound. So the best we can help our future generations not keep passing that on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I honestly believe that, we can inherit generationally stuff that, has been passed on through our ancestry. And so maybe, as I say, that could have been the case from your mother that you started off with that infection. And then
Mhm.
latterly, like you say, your chronic health problems were not to help by your own experiences that you're going through in your own life.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, when I was growing up, for many years, I'd have people in my life that every time something, you know, quote, negative happened to me, I no longer believe in necessarily defining things as good and bad and making things so black and white. However, as I grew up, you know, many of the things were perceived as happening poorly to me. And so other people very much would always say things to me like, oh gosh, poor you. Oh, you know, your life is so hard. Oh, you know, this is always happening to you. Why you again? And I never felt that way. This was just my life to live. This is the only life I've known. And I feel like I eventually realized that I don't need to know the why of the pains I've been given in this life. I don't necessarily need to know what would have led me to not have the trauma or to have been more aligned right out of the gate. But what I do need to do is focus on the now and what it is I can control. And how do I pass on love in this world? And to do that, I had to take responsibility even for the things in my past that weren't necessarily mine to hold.
Absolutely. You know, there are things we can control and there are things we can't control that are outside of us, aren't they? But it's an inside job basically, though, isn't it?
Right? Exactly. Yeah, we spend a lot of time trying to change everything else except us, you know, and that again is a losing game. It's just not possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very aligned with your thinking and thoughts around these issues that we're speaking about. So for you, when you had that sort of realization moment when you was holding your own baby and nursing your own baby, um, and you said that you were aware of your inner voice, and
Hmm.
sometimes that inner voice is drowned out by our ego and our louder, I suppose, from a place of fear voice that isn't our intuition, that isn't our inner heart voice, is it? But you know when you have that sort of aha moment, don't you? You really
Oh,
sort of can feel the
yes.
difference.
You feel it deeply, and you know, if for those listening today, that to me, if you take anything from this conversation, to me the most important thing we can do is simply know what that voice sounds like, you know, do what you need to do. And so it's going to require some stillness, it's going to require time with yourself, it's going to require a peace mindset about yourself, you know, removing the judgment and just finding that difference. The difference between an inner critic and your deepest inner voice and knowing is very obvious when you start really listening and know and looking for it. The inner critic is going to make you feel small. It's when those judgment things come in, it's telling you to stay where you're at, not do what your gut knows to do. It's telling you you're bad, you're wrong. It's all the things that make us feel icky. That's your inner critic. Your inner voice feels clear and it feels peaceful and it feels right. It sometimes feels scary. You know, for me, eventually what happened in after that nursery, it eventually walked me, you know, a few years later to leave my abusive husband. And I knew that, you know, quite early on after the nursery. I knew early on that that was going to be my path, but I didn't have the courage to do it at first. I was very beaten down. It took me a lot of different steps, including for myself, deep therapy, talking to friends, confronting my own role in continuing to have unhealthy relationships. But each step of the way, my inner voice guided me to that process. And so it's just being able to know the difference between that inner critic and inner voice, and then having the courage to take the steps towards what that inner voice is telling you. And it could be baby steps. For me, it started with secretly going to therapy. My ex-husband would have been very against that. And so that was something in the moment that I could control and start kind of taking back for myself. You know, so whatever baby steps you can take to just keep movement towards whatever your inner voice is telling you is, I believe, how you walk towards a path of self-love and eventually unlocking your life's purpose.
Absolutely. And I think even just even babier step than that is sharing with a trusted friend or family
Mm.
member, how you feel.
Exactly. So we're kind of naming things that are now my framework. So my framework were really just born from the steps that I was nudged toward by that inner voice. And what I find when I talk to people like you, Lyn, and people who have walked their own healing journeys, I feel that we walk very similar journeys when we open ourselves up to healing. And so for me, it really was that the listen to the inner voice, and then it was examine your past as an observer. For me, this was born from my love for my daughter. And that kind of unconditional feeling, I was able to apply that to myself in the past and to be able to start looking at my past through that lens. And if you do that, it just helps you see things more clearly and realize, gosh, why do I treat my past self so poorly when I wouldn't treat anybody I love this way? And it just gives you grace. And so as you do that, you can then start looking back at your messy past, and you can value the lessons in the mess, because you're not coming from a place of judgment. You're not asking, why did this happen to me? You're asking, what did this teach me? And then as you walk that path, it's going to eventually bring you to a place where the universe starts rising up to meet you. I call this embrace the messiness. I mean, embrace the magic of the universe. All of a sudden, when you're starting to do that inner alignment, the universe starts sending signs, and you just get it. To me, I call it a hug from the universe. It's just the world kind of rises up and is like, good job, you are walking your path. And that to me is magic. I love that feeling. And then as you continue down this path, you eventually get to a point where you are starting to feel so resolved in yourself that you get to the point where you can open up to a trusted friend. And it doesn't have to be everybody. It doesn't have to be on a podcast like this, but just starting in a space that feels safe, in a space that you know you're not going to be judged, and just start trying to share some of the truth that you've been holding on to. And in my situation, I thought that would push people away, but it did the total opposite. When I started telling people my mess included trouble with alcohol. My mess included affairs. It included, sexual situations as young as sixth grade, and things that I had so much shame for. And when I started opening up, the person I was opening up to opened up to me. And
Yeah.
then I trusted somebody else, and then they opened up to me. And all these years later, here we are, 17 years after that night in the nursery, and here I am now writing my story in a book. That's coming out later this year, sharing on the podcast, because I am freed of the shame of my story. My story is simply holistically who I am and what I've been through and what I do with that, and I own all of it.
Yeah, and I think it's so um, impactful to me to hear you speak in the way you're speaking, because I think there's so many people out there, including myself, that can relate to carrying the burden of guilt around
Mhm.
what we've done or haven't done in our lives, and and feeling ashamed, and how
Mm.
that impacts how you live your life. And for me, the biggest freeing thing that I've ever done for myself is let it go, let it
Yeah.
all go.
Exactly. Exactly. To me, it's letting it go. And in how, in the different way, there's different ways to do that. I'll share another part of my journey. I've had periods in my life where I've thought that I have arrived. I've cracked the code of life. It's like now everything's going to be easy from here on out. And I did have a situation a few years back when I was approaching 40 years old. I was sitting having lunch with my girlfriends, and I joked and I said, God, here I am. I'm in a happy marriage, blended family. Like life is good. Like, gosh, the first part of my life was so chaotic. The rest it might be boring. I'm just used to the chaos. Well, soon after that, the universe was like, hold on. And it set off a series of events, including sitting there with my grandfather as he passed away from lung cancer. And then soon later, finding out through ancestry.com that the dad who raised me was not my biological father. And
Right.
talk about a talk about an identity, crusher. I mean, that, it set me back. It sent me back. It sent me back to, poor decisions, drinking more heavily again. It set me into just a spiral of trying to keep the peace with everybody instead of really letting my emotions out. And what that has now gifted me was the realization that the journey of life never stops. The lessons never stop. However, when we build resolve in ourself, yet I believe that because I had walked that healing path up till that point, yes, that did shake my foundation a bit. However, I had the tools deep within me to navigate that in a
Mm.
way that led me to grow even further. And it ended up leading to a point where I finally healed my deep father wound. I stopped really looking at the dad who raised me and wishing I would have had a different dad. And I realized that the love I was seeking from all these other people, I had to give it to myself, and it just was beautiful. And so from there, it just has kind of blossomed into realizing that I'm constantly having to look for what my healing needs are. And so the last thing I'll say on that is that led me over this last year, even all these years later, I'm still checking in with my body, and I still need to find healing modalities. And
Mm.
this past year for me, that really has been body work. It's been something called craniosacral massage, which is essentially you have your clothes on, your face up, and it's essentially a practitioner is focusing on your vagus nerve and helping kind of just give your nervous system a little bit of a help of a reset. And it's been incredible. And then the other one is somatic experiencing, which is going to a class a little bit similar to yoga. I think some people find yoga for them does this, but it's having tips and things that you can do yourself and body movements to move the stress along. You have to feel the feelings, but there's ways to not numb them, instead to be able to let them do their work on you and get them out of your body. And that's been huge for me.
Yeah, I think it's transmuting those negative feelings and energies into something positive, isn't it? Or releasing, finding ways
Ex-
and
Exactly.
modalities to release it.
Yes, exactly. So you're always, as you do this work, you'll realize that you're always going to be a work in progress. And as long as you're checking in with that inner voice and you're having a curiosity and not judgment about it, you now are the expert on you, and you are essentially always doing the work to make sure you are aligned. And that work is, I think it's the work we're all meant to do on our time on earth.
Absolutely. And I think, like you say, we're never sorted, but there's always lessons to learn. So I think there's always something that presented to you to sort of potentially, I suppose, for want of a better word, trigger us.
Yes,
Mm.
trigger
But
us. I feel like, Lynn, I feel like it's like once you do this work, there is a natural flow to your life. I'm not saying that it's so easy. It's not always easy, but there is a flow to it of ease. And no, and you just learn that regardless of what's happening to you, regardless of whether you define it as good or bad, regardless, you hold your alignment.
mm,
And in doing that, you can conquer anything.
absolutely. It's about placing a meaning on it. So if you do feel triggered by something and it creates a negative emotion within you, that's a red flag to tell you something needs healing, something needs releasing, something needs working on, doesn't it?
Exactly. I had a recent example. So this still, I still get triggered. I know I'm not a perfect human. And I had an experience recently where a girlfriend and I hadn't really gotten one-on-one time in a while. We were relying too heavily on text messages to maintain our friendship. And her and I were both feeling a little triggered by each other. And, it just kind of spiraled. I maybe shared a little of my hurt. And then she sent me this very long email sharing her hurt. And it would have been easy in the past to just maybe end the friendship, just be mad at each other and blame each other. And instead, her and I both have walked some of this kind of healing path together. And so we very much took that as a reason to look inward and get to a point where we can understand first why this was triggering us so much. and then come together and have a healed conversation, not from a place of blame, not even from a place of fully understanding the other person, but we realize that at the end of the day, the things that we want for our friendship and our life are the same. And so
Mm.
there was just no need for us to stay small and nitpick all the little things that had been annoying us. And I think that that process, knowing yourself deeply and recognizing your triggers, and then a partner in your life doing the same, it just lends itself to a collaborative relationship where each of you are supported in becoming your best self. And there's no longer this tit for tat kind of play.
Absolutely. And I think we've all got our roles to play in a relationship. In a healthy relationships, at the end of the day, it's easy to think, oh, it's him, it's him, it's him. But, we've got our own responsibility, the part that we've played within that relationship, even if it's just allowing ourselves to stay in it far too long. We have
That's
to
right.
we have to take responsibility. Well, how we're contributing to whatever situation we're in, don't we?
Yeah, we exactly do. I believe that's the only thing we can control. My husband and I, so for both of us, this was our second marriage. We call it Life 2.0. And for our Life 2.0, when we got married, we felt that it was inauthentic to promise forever. Here we are. We had both promised forever to other people, and that failed miserably. So, here we were not going to do that again. But what we did promise was to be our best self, to bring our best to each new day, and to support each other on our individual soul paths, wherever that may take us. And we recognize that that may take us apart, but in the day to day, we do believe that it's going to actually add up to forever because when you're in a situation where somebody fully supports your soul journey and you in return support theirs, it's really the most powerful dynamic. And imagine if we expanded that out. I always say the more you do this work, you are contagious. I didn't become a coach until people all around me kept telling me, you're my informal life coach,
Mm.
and it's because the healing you do, it shines brightly. So when we do this work, yes, it ripples to my husband, his ripples back to me, but then collectively that ripples out to our circle. And so that's how I believe we heal the world to love itself.
I love that you said that because that's firmly what I believe in terms of second or third relationships. That you don't need to promise the forever bit. That's too much pressure on a relationship because we all evolve and have got our own path, and that could mean that further down the line that you might end up separating. So I love that you said that because some people take offense and think, yeah, no, 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 no. That means you're setting yourself up for failure, but it's not, is it? It's actually setting yourself up for success more.
Yeah, I think you're setting yourself up for success. And I also believe that endings are not failure.
No,
I believe that in this life, that things run their course. Our soul journey takes us where it needs to go. And when we get a lesson or when a relationship is no longer serving us, then you level up and you move on. And that is not sad to me. That is the purpose of life is to continue to grow. And with that, there's going to be endings, but then there's going to be new beginnings. And I think that's beautiful.
I 100% agree. So, Megan, for the purposes of the audience, what's the best way they can connect with you if they're interested in finding out more about you and what the work that you do?
Yes, thanks, Lynn. So I would recommend people go to my website. It's meghanndawson.com. My name is, for anybody that's ever read the book, The Thornbirds, is spelled from that book. That's where my mom, when she was in high school, was reading that book, and it was her favorite. And so Meghann is spelled a little bit weird. So it's Meghann Dawson.com. And there's a place where you can sign up for my email newsletter. And I will admit, up until now, I haven't always been the best with that because my business was just launched late last year, and I've been kind of growing and learning and all of that. But now, so many exciting things coming on ahead for now. So I have a book that'll be launched later this year. So when you sign up, you'll be the kind of the first in the know for the details of when you can check that book out. That's the whole origin story to my background. But then also there'll be links to my podcast, which I so recommend to your listeners. The first 8 episodes of the podcast goes deep into my framework. And so the things that we talked about, the path towards loving yourself, it's just a free resource. You can go and get a little bit more insight on what each of those steps are. And maybe some of those steps are going to resonate with where you are today.
Excellent. So thank you very much for sharing that. And also, any final words on the subject of self-love?
Yes. First, Lyn, thank you so much for having me. I've just enjoyed our conversation so much. I feel like you and I would be fast friends if we could grab coffee or something together. I could just talk to you all day. And then as far as yourself and everybody listening, I would just say that check in with yourself and your life from time to time and ask yourself, do you have an easy flow? Do you know yourself? Do you feel like you're living your life for yourself or for others? And as you do that, keep checking in with that inner voice of yours. And as you do that, work towards, if things don't feel good in your life right now, start taking ownership of that and listen to your inner voice for guidance on how you can heal and bring alignment into your life so that no longer is holding you back.
Excellent. Thank you, Meghann. It's been a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Lyn. Appreciate it.
So I'll just leave you with true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group 2 Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's lyn@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.